Live from London, this is BBC News. A 58-year-old man, Ryan Routh, has been named by US media as the suspect of Sunday's apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Donald Trump was left unharmed after gunshots were fired on a Florida golf course where he was playing.
The Secret Service agent that was on the course did a fantastic job. He was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual.
The suspect fled but was then arrested after authorities surrounded his vehicle on a nearby highway. The former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards is due to appear at a hearing today after he admitted to making indecent photographs of children. Poland declares a state of natural disaster as extreme flooding wreaks havoc across Central and Eastern Europe. And the epic Japanese tale Shogun becomes the first foreign language TV series to win the Best Drama Award at the Emmys. Hello and welcome. I'm Martine Croxall. Donald Trump has said that he is safe and well after what the FBI described as a second apparent assassination attempt against him. A Secret Service agent spotted an assault rifle poking out of bushes on the former president's Florida golf course within several hundred meters of where he was playing. The agent opened fire. The suspect, who fled in a car, was later arrested. Police have searched his home in North Carolina. Joe Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris both expressed relief that Mr. Trump had not been hurt. Security had been tightened around the Republican presidential election candidate after an assassination attempt in July. Graham Satchell reports.
They blocked it off.
The I-95 in Florida and pictures taken by a passing motorist show a large number of police surrounding a vehicle. Law enforcement officers have just detained a man suspected of attempting to assassinate Donald Trump. He was driving the black car seen here at the side of the road. The former president was playing golf on his own course when a number of gunshots were heard. A Secret Service agent had spotted a rifle being pointed from bushes at the edge of the course.
They have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off.
The police recovered what they say is an AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks containing ceramic tiles and a GoPro camera.
We are not sure right now if the individual was able to take a shot at our agents, but for sure our agents were able to engage with the subject.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart.
It is just a matter of weeks since the last assassination attempt on Donald Trump. He was shot and injured at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. Just moments later, he was on his feet and shouting, "Fight, fight," to the crowd. After this latest attempt, the former president put out a brief statement. "There were gunshots in my vicinity," he said, "but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I wanted you to hear this first. I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender." Vice President Kamala Harris said, "I've been briefed on reports of gunshots fired near former President Trump and his property in Florida. I'm glad he is safe. Violence has no place in America." Police have now raided the former home of the suspect in this case. He's been named by American media as 58-year-old Ryan Routh. On social media, Routh claims to have fought against Russian forces in Ukraine. Donald Trump left his golf course under heavy security a few hours after the thwarted attack. There will be questions about how a man with a rifle was able to get so close to the former president, but Donald Trump has praised the Secret Service for their response and says he will continue to campaign this week. Graham Satchell, BBC News.
Our correspondent Tom Bateman is outside the Palm Beach golf course where the incident took place. He sent this update.
Well, over the coming hours, there will be much focus on the suspect, named by US media as Ryan Wesley Routh, a 58-year-old former construction worker from North Carolina. What the police have said is that the suspect was apprehended around 40 miles north of here in a vehicle that they had traced from the scene here, a black Nissan, they said, spotted by an eyewitness, that was then stopped by the local sheriff north of here on the interstate highway, and the suspect apprehended and the vehicle then searched. The suspect now being held in a jail in the county there, and what we expect in the next few hours in the morning is that that person will be transferred back south down here to West Palm Beach, and the potential then for a court appearance. We heard from law enforcement officials during that news conference earlier that if they decide to book him, they can then press charges locally here, but there's also, of course, the distinct possibility of federal charges because there is an FBI investigation now leading all of this. And to give you a sense of the geography here, just behind me is the sign there for the Trump International Golf Club. This corner here, behind the bushes here, is hole 6 of the golf course. Now, that is where Donald Trump was heading towards. He was between the 5th and the 6th holes, according to the police. And it was that advanced security sweep by the Secret Service that spotted the barrel of that assault rifle pointing through a chain link fence. And it was that very fact that it appears ultimately protected Donald Trump, because those Secret Service agents fired towards the suspect. What remains unclear is whether or not the suspect fired either at that Secret Service agent or at Donald Trump himself. We don't have that confirmed yet. And the police and the FBI were asked that question in the news conference. They say that whether or not a shot was fired or shots were fired by the suspect still remains part of their investigation.
Tom Bateman. The BBC Verify team has been looking at social media profiles which match the name of the alleged suspect, Ryan Routh. Here's our news analysis editor, Ros Atkins.
Our colleagues at CBS have spoken to sources who have indicated that the suspect is called Ryan Routh. And with that name, BBC Verify was able to start looking at different social media platforms to see if we could find accounts that match that name. And we have. We've managed to identify several social media accounts in that name. We've then cross-referenced some of the content on those accounts with an image that allegedly shows a man being arrested at the scene on the highway near to Donald Trump's golf course. And if we look at those accounts, a number of themes emerge. First of all, go back to 2020, and there is a post on Twitter, now called X, in which the man directly addresses Donald Trump and says, "I voted for you in 2016, but then says that we all were greatly disappointed. I will be glad when you're gone," he says in this tweet. So that was back in 2020. More recently, a lot of the social media output on these accounts has been around Ukraine. We know that the man in these accounts is involved in organising for foreign volunteers to go to Ukraine to join the fight against Russia. He was quoted in an article on just that subject in the New York Times last year. There's also a video that BBC Verify has seen on YouTube, which appears to show him in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, again talking about the issue of the West's approach to Ukraine, and particularly about the issue of volunteers coming to Ukraine. And it's clear in a number of these posts across a number of platforms that he is frustrated about the West's approach to Ukraine. He feels that more should be done. So that is coming out again and again. Of course, we have to be cautious about this because we're still learning details about who this person is, and we don't have a huge amount of confirmed detail from the authorities themselves. However, it is relevant, based on that sourcing from CBS and based on the research that BBC Verify has done, that these themes are coming out from those social media accounts.
Ros Atkins. Well, my colleague in Washington, Lucy Hockings, has been speaking to a former US Navy SEAL and FBI agent, Jonathan Gilliam.
Well, when there's an assassination attempt and it is officially determined that it was an assassination attempt against a sitting president, a former president, or a nominee for president of one of the parties, the FBI will take over that. They take over that investigation. But what you have to realize is when we use those words like they take over the investigation, the reality is that the FBI works closely with all law enforcement in most of these types of cases. It actually becomes basically a joint task force so they can reach out to not only other FBI offices, but also other law enforcement entities where this individual may have been known. They will also work with intelligence agencies to see if any of the information comes back about this individual where he may have been part of a state-sponsored assassination attempt or any type of terrorist group.
And Jonathan, what do you make of the evidence that the FBI has got so far? Because I've heard it described here in the US as being a gold mine, given we've got the GoPro, we've got the gun, we have the car, all sorts of crucial pieces of evidence that the FBI will have already.
Well, it's very telling, and it's telling on many different levels. One, the fact, let's look at both the July assassination attempt and this assassination attempt. This is twice that a shooter has been able to get within 500 yards, which for that particular weapon is an SKS. It's an AK-47, Russian-style AK-47, is the max effective range is 450 yards, especially with a scope. So Trump was estimated to be within 400 or 500 yards of this individual. So twice now, somebody has been able to get within that distance. That's something that the FBI should take into account because now it's gone beyond just a simple dropping of the ball of tactics where these threat assessments are not being done properly. The individual himself left what appears to be not just a backpack, but possibly 2 ballistic plates that are tied and hung up against that fence. And he had the rifle in between those, which meant that he was ready for a potential shootout. He wanted to record it. And then he went to the car and they located the vehicle with him in it. The GoPro, if he had any other issues or things that were recorded on there, and his social media. This individual, unlike July, has not had his social media scrubbed, so the FBI will be able to look at that and determine who this guy is as far as social media tells, and then hopefully they get his phones and things like that and be able to scrub those as well to see if he has any other contacts that could have been involved.
Former FBI agent Jonathan Gilliam. Now, around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. US Secret Service agents appear to have foiled an assassination attempt on Donald Trump as he was playing golf in Florida. The former president was unharmed. A suspect has been arrested. Let's speak to Professor Natasha Linstead, a US politics lecturer at the University of Essex. Thank you very much, Professor Linstead, for joining us today. What do you believe this second assassination attempt tells us about the state of US politics?
I think it's a major concern that we've had now a second assassination attempt because it tells us that the level of political violence is just increasing in U.S. politics, that there's a lot of dysfunction, that there's so much polarization, that elections have become such high stakes and emotional affairs. And with Trump saying that he won't really step down even if he loses the election, that really raises the stakes for those that don't want him to be elected. They'll find alternative means to deal with whatever their grievances are. So with the first assassination attempt back in July 13th, this one had a much bigger political impact at the time, that it seemed to really seal the fate that Trump was going to win. He was riding high after a good debate with Biden, and Biden performed terribly. Then this went into the convention. And there was all kinds of concerns that there would be all these copycat types of assassination attempts, that the level of vitriol would increase. And thankfully, that wasn't the case in the immediate aftermath. But we're seeing that political violence tends to beget more political violence. Already 2 months later, another assassination attempt, because the initial attempt showed that there were cracks in the security for the detail that Trump had, the security service that Trump had. And so, of course, this inspired another attempt on him within 60 days.
How should this then change the way in which the campaign is conducted in terms of the logistics, the organisation, but also the tone?
I think with the logistics, they're going to continue to try to offer him more security. He doesn't have the same level of security as a president would have, because he's just a candidate. He does have the Secret Service, around him, but that's clearly not enough, because whenever he goes into some kind of open space, it's very difficult to guard an entire golf course, for example, and to spot them. And thankfully, in this case, the services was able to spot it, the would-be attacker. But the other issue is the tone, as you mentioned, and there's just so much vitriol in the rhetoric that is stoking polarization, and that is making this whole campaign much more emotional and potentially violent than it needs to be. Now, Trump said after the first assassination attempt that he was going to tone down his own rhetoric, that he was going to be nice, and then the Republicans had a fairly jubilant convention, but his own speech, he veered off into the harmful rhetoric that is so dangerous in American politics, that stokes so much polarization. So we would hope that both candidates would tone things down, but we're seeing that with this particular campaign, particularly Trump can't help himself in really trying to rile up his base. And at this point, he's really going to try to use the second assassination attempt to gain more campaign funds, as he's way behind Kamala Harris in this regard.
Professor Natasha Linstead from the University of Essex, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
The former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards could find out later what he'll be sentenced to after admitting making indecent photographs of children. The 63-year-old is due to appear for a hearing at Westminster Magistrates Court today. The Chief Magistrate may decide, though, that he doesn't have sufficient sentencing powers and could send the case up to a Crown Court. Our senior UK correspondent, Seema Katecha, joins us now from outside Westminster Magistrates Court. Seema, what are we thinking could happen today?
Well, 63-year-old Huw Edwards could be sentenced later after pleading guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. But there is a possibility, as you say, that the case is sent to the Crown Court because the magistrate feels he doesn't have sufficient sentencing powers. Now, a reminder of the case, Huw Edwards was sent hundreds of explicit images on WhatsApp. 41 of those images were of children, and 7 of those images were deemed to be of a serious sexual nature. 2 of those images involved a child between the ages of 7 and 9. So when I was back here in July when he pleaded guilty, his barrister told the court Mr. Edwards did not keep any images, did not send any to anyone else, and did not and has not sought similar images from anywhere else. We also heard that he had mental health problems and physical health problems. The prosecution asked the magistrate to consider a suspended sentence. So if that sentencing does take place today, we're likely to hear what are called more mitigating factors. A prison sentence is possible, but there are other possibilities too, such as a community order or Mr. Edwards being sent on a sex offender programme. The hearing is scheduled to start at 10 a.m, so we expect him to arrive here in the next hour or so.
Seema, thank you very much. Seema Katecha. Police in the German city of Cologne are carrying out what appears to be a major operation following reports of an explosion near the centre of the city. Well, the first reports came on Monday morning. It's not clear at this stage what may have caused any explosion, nor if there have been any injuries or arrests. Local police have posted on social media that they are carrying out an operation on one of the main ring roads, the Hohenzollern Ring, and are telling residents to avoid the area. Tito Jackson, an original member of the Jackson 5 pop group and brother of the late Michael Jackson, has died aged 70, according to reports in US media. As part of the iconic band, he performed on hits including ABC, The Love You Save and I Want You Back. The group formed in 1964 and has sold more than 150 million records. Former Jackson 5 drummer Jonathan Moffat paid tribute on social media, saying he was sending love and prayers to the entire Jackson family. So Keir Starmer is in Rome for talks with the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The pair sat side by side at a business breakfast. More events are planned during the day before news conferences in the afternoon. Let's speak to our Southern Europe correspondent Mark Lowen, who's in Rome for us. Mark, and I believe that irregular migration, as it's being called, is going to be fairly high up the agenda.
I think top of the agenda, Martine, because this is something that both countries struggle with a graphic reminder of the challenge Britain faces yesterday when 8 bodies were recovered in the English Channel of migrants trying to cross from France, and small boat crossings from France to Britain have picked up this year. And Italy is the country that deals with the highest number of migrant arrivals in the EU. And yet, in the last 8 months, it has seen a 64% drop in those coming by boats to Italy, principally from North Africa. And that's been done partly by the EU and Italy giving a lot of money to Tunisia, which is the main point of departure for these migrants, to try to encourage the Tunisians to improve their Coast Guard capabilities and to clamp down on departures. But also, Italy is building migrant reception centres in neighbouring Albania, financed and run by the Italian authorities. They're due to open later this year to be able to hold up to 36,000 migrants and refugees per year, from where they will make an asylum claim to Italy. If that is rejected, they could face deportation. And Keir Starmer has already said he is interested in that model of outsourcing, offshoring migrant reception centres. It is very different to the Rwanda plan that was being considered by Rishi Sunak, his predecessor, because, as I say, these migrant reception centres are being run by the Italians, and then they would get asylum actually in Italy rather than in Rwanda. But this is something that will be discussed, I think, in these meetings today with Giorgia Meloni, and Keir Starmer has already said that he's interested in that option.
An interesting meeting of minds, if there is one, though, Mark, because politically these two leaders are really a long way apart.
They are. I mean, Keir Starmer began his political life in the Young Socialists, the youth wing of the Labour Party. Giorgia Meloni began her political life as a teenager in the Young Neo-Fascists in this country. She has moved away from her neo-fascist roots. She is now a right-winger. Her party is often called far-right, but she leads a right-wing coalition here in Italy. Keir Starmer, clearly a new prime minister from the centre-left, so they are from opposite sides of the spectrum. But the British Prime Minister has said that he wants to reset relations with key European partners. Italy, the third biggest EU economy, a key player, particularly in Ukraine and elsewhere. It is an important relationship. And even though it is not such a natural political fit as there was between Rishi Sunak and Giorgia Meloni, both right-wing leaders, they had a very close personal relationship. Clearly, Starmer is keen to build that with Giorgia Meloni, and today an important part of that, I think.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark Lowen in Rome. Charities in the UK have called on the government to find a new approach to dealing with migrants after the deaths of more than 8 people trying to cross the English Channel in a small boat. They were among 60 in a boat which hit rocks off the French coast on Saturday night. It's understood the vessel was carrying people from Eritrea, Sudan, Syria and Iran. Well, our correspondent in Ambleteuse, Simon Jones, told us there was a 10-month-old baby among those rescued.
in the early hours of yesterday morning, a dangerously overloaded boat with around 60 people set off from the coastline here. It didn't get very far before getting caught on rocks, and the boat was simply torn apart. 8 people lost their lives. Around 50 people were rescued, 6 of those taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby with hypothermia. But the boat was brought back to shore, and really you couldn't believe so many people tried to get on board that boat. And what was telling was there was actually a Charles rubber ring, the type of thing you'd use in a swimming pool, that had been given to someone to act as a life jacket. And in fact, of the 60 or so people on board, only around 10 people had life jackets. So what it shows is the smugglers are packing more and more people onto these boats, trying to make more and more profit out of this human misery. And so you've got the authorities here and on the other side of the channel talking about the need to go after those criminal gangs and break them up.
Simon Jones reporting from northern France. Just a reminder that there's a live page up and running on the BBC News website following that story of the apparent second assassination attempt on Donald Trump while he was playing golf at his course in Florida on Sunday. The suspect in this attempt was a pro-Ukraine activist, according to local reports, and US media have said that the person now arrested is 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Routh. Stay with us on BBC News.